Namaste and welcome to another insightful episode of GeoInterview, where we explore important global topics and engage in thoughtful conversations about the evolving dynamics of international relations. Joining us for this insightful dialogue is Mr. Mathieu Droin, Consul of Strategic Affairs at the Embassy of France in Washington, D.C. With a wealth of experience in transatlantic and maritime security, Mr. Droin brings a unique perspective on the Indo-Pacific and France engagement in the region. Mr. Droin, bonjour, and thank you so much for joining us today. How are you, sir?
Bonjour, namaste. I'm good, very good. Thank you. Mea chahu.
That's great, sir. So, sir, to begin, we know that France Indo-Pacific policy uh, is an important part of its international strategy. So, could you share how this policy fits with France's broader European security and defense strategies? And what role can EU institutions play in supporting these initiatives in the region?
Sure. Well, let's first consider Indo-Pacific for what it is, which is a strategic concept applied to a certain geography, and this particular geography varies from one country to another. I think for France, the geography is important because unlike other European countries, France is in a very unique position as it likes to repeat and brand itself as a resident power in the Indo-Pacific because it is the only European country that has overseas territories in the region, both in the Indian Ocean, the Southwest Indian Ocean, and the Southern Pacific. And that also accounts for most of its EEZ, which is one of the biggest in the world. It's almost the size of Europe. So this is very important to emphasize regarding France's vision of the Indo-Pacific, which is a strategic concept, but it's also very much a domestic issue. And that geography also frames the way France has been engaging in the region. The initial thinking when President Macron first announced an Indo-Pacific strategy, he mentioned an axis between Paris, Delhi, and Canberra to reflect also these two pillars of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific. As your listeners might be aware, we had some ups and downs with Australia, especially following this AUKUS pact that scrapped a major submarines deal for France. Now water has passed under the bridge, but this has a bit reshuffled the way France perceives the Indo-Pacific. And at the strategic level, I think France also understands the Indo-Pacific for what it is, which is also mainly driven by the rise of China as a major strategic player in the region, and how do we make sure with allies and partners that we build, let's say, a playing field where international law, freedom of navigation is upheld, and that protects all our partners, but also in the case of France, our own territories. And I might come back later in the discussion on the European dimension that you aptly raised.
So it's interesting to see how France integrates its Indo-Pacific goals with its European obligations. Now, shifting to maritime security, what do you think are the biggest threat, according to you, France is facing in the Indo-Pacific? And how do partnerships with countries like India and Japan help address those issues?
Well, there has been in the past few years a proliferation of threats in the maritime domain, because of course the Indo-Pacific, you have Indo and Pacific, is pretty much a maritime concept, and so you have this traditional threat at sea, such as piracy, and France, with its European partners, has been very active on this issue with some important successes, notably in Northwest Indian Ocean through, for instance, the operation Atalanta, which is an EU maritime operation to fight to combat piracy. But as I mentioned, France also has major exclusive economic zones, which imply a lot of challenges on how to manage these areas, also to prevent overfishing, or what is called illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, notably on the side of China. So that requires a lot of capabilities, even far away from France's mainland territory, and also with some successes in this regard. And beyond these threats, I mean, of course, some of the key drivers are the risks on freedom of navigation in some hotspots of the Indo-Pacific, specifically in the South China Sea. So France is one of the most active international players in sending ships to cross, for instance, the Taiwan Strait, to recall the importance of freedom of navigation. But also, it is fair to say that we see more and more the risk of a return of naval warfare in the Indo-Pacific, with many countries building up their navies, and this is especially so the case for China, which, as we like to emphasize in France, basically China builds the equivalent of the French Navy every 4 years, to give you an idea. So I mean, every country has the right to build its capacities, but of course there are some worrying trends depending on what are the strategic objectives that you're pursuing while building up your military assets. And so France is also, as you mentioned, closing ranks with some very important partners, and also because it has a thriving defense industry, selling some important equipment to those partners. India is probably chief of them. India has bought Rafale jets, but also some submarines, and there are also some important submarines and frigates contracts across the region, notably with Indonesia, for instance. So we are building these networks of close partnerships to advance the very goals that I mentioned earlier.
Yes, that's very insightful. It sounds like these partnerships will really going to play a crucial role in safeguarding not just regional security, but also global trade routes. Now, with France
Indeed.
growing economic and defense ties in the region, what is your view on the development of new trade and defense agreements? And how do you think these agreements will influence the strategic security balance in the Indo-Pacific?
Right. So I think there are two levels in your question. There are the frameworks and the formats that are being built in general in the region, and what France does specifically. I think if you look at the most significant agreements or partnerships or formats that have emerged in the past few months and years, it is fair to say that they are mostly US centric, also because probably only the US has the clout and the importance to be able to manage and develop that amount of partnerships. So you have of course the AUKUS partnership that, as I mentioned, France was not very happy with, but mainly for the form, not for the substance. And then you have a proliferation of frameworks, what the US like to call a lattice work or constellation of formats. Some even mention now is security architecture. So you have even yesterday at the ministers level, this Japan, Korea, US format. You have the Japan, Philippine, US format. So this all in all contributes to not yet a security architecture, but indeed an overlapping of frameworks that ultimately can contribute to shape the balance of powers in the region. So France is not part of this. It is an interested observer, and watches it closely, without any, I mean, nothing to say really about this, because these are sovereign decisions. I think France is concerned just that we don't find ourselves in a position where we have two very clear blocks in a Cold War manner that are opposing each other. So ultimately, I think France is more favorable to having this kind of over different layers of formats and framework, rather than having, for instance, NATO being active in the Indo-Pacific, or as the new Japanese Prime Minister mentioned, Asian NATO in the Indo-Pacific. And so now, to your point of what France specifically does in this regard, France is not standing by. It has first its bilateral close relationships that I mentioned, India, Indonesia. Now the relations are back on track with Australia. But it has also created its own mini-laterals, let's say, especially two trilateral format, which, as you will see, India is pretty much the cornerstone of it. So you have this India, UAE, France trilateral format, which was launched in the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly 2 years ago. You also have, a France, Australia, India format. So now, to be fully transparent, I think these partnerships are not yet at the level and pace we would like them to be, but I think they are telling of what France aims to achieve in the region, and also who are the main partners that it tries to build on, which I think in the case of India really reflects a very powerful and strong strategic alignment on many issues, but broadly speaking, on the way we perceive and we approach strategic competition in the Indo-Pacific.
Definitely, sir. What you said is really true, and sounds like these agreements are setting the stage for a more connected and resilient Indo-Pacific. Now, speaking about strategic rivalries, especially between the US, China, and other regional players, what role do you see France playing in mitigating these tensions while keeping peace and economic ties intact?
Yes, that's probably the fundamental question, and France, I think, has an original position in this regard, and probably that relates also with the Indians thinking. So France, as you may know, as much as India does, likes to emphasize its strategic autonomy.
Yes.
So we have our own alliances. We're a proud member of NATO. We're a proud founding member and active member of the European Union. But ultimately, France is also keen on highlighting its strategic autonomy, which allows France first to have its own defense capacities, including the nuclear dimension, but also its own strategic thinking on key issues. So when it comes to the US-China competition, I think France is probably one of the most aware countries in Europe that this will be the key topic of this century, and this is already the key priority of the United States, which is our key ally. There's nothing comparable between France's partnership with the United States and France's relations with China. But we also think that it might not be the European interests to be fully aligned on the United States position vis-a-vis China, in the sense that we don't have any international supremacy to defend, as is the case for the United States. Plus, we are very concerned by the way China evolves and tries to advance its strategic goals, especially his ever-increasing ties with Russia, who is directly invading a European country. But we also have important economic and trade ties with China. Plus, we think that China is absolutely key to tackle perhaps the most important challenges of all, starting with climate change, but also on other transnational issues such as combating poverty or fighting terrorism or international crime. So and yes, build our own network of partnerships in the region and try to avoid as many Indo-Pacific countries want to that we end up in having a conflict or a war between these two superpowers, which of course would be absolutely dramatic for everyone.
Yes, France's emphasis on multilateralism seems like a balanced approach in a region marked by strategic competition. Considering your experience in European defense policy, how do you see the European Union playing a role in supporting France's Indo-Pacific strategy, especially in matters of security and defense?
So I think we're very happy and comfortable to see the increasing level of awareness among Europeans vis-à-vis the Indo-Pacific. In fact, the EU having its own Indo-Pacific strategy is pretty much the result of a French advocacy in Brussels and among European capitals, with the support of other member states who already had this level of awareness on the issue, such as Germany or the Netherlands. And so we see more and more European countries having genuine interest in the region, and so it is still, to be frank, very nascent. The European Union is developing important cooperations in the Indo-Pacific in terms of maritime security. It has, as I mentioned, this flagship mission on fighting piracy in the Northwest Indian Ocean. It has another operation called Aspides, also in the Northwest Indian Ocean. But it's still a minor player, and we would like the EU to do more in the region. It's not easy because we have now a variety of pressing issues in our neighborhood and also in the Middle East and in Africa. So we have to find the resources to tackle these issues all together, which is not always easy. But I think we're in a good way. I think some of the, let's say, the most important debates among Europeans is exactly what we mentioned in the previous question: is how should we fully align on our key partner, the United States, because some of European countries don't have direct interests, or maybe not as direct as France interests in the region, and so their key priority is how I make sure that my key security ally, the United States, is happy with the way I engage in the Indo-Pacific. And others have more agency and are more keen to have our own European approach in the Indo-Pacific. So these are some of the ongoing debates, sometimes tensions, but I think it's a healthy debate to have among Europeans.
So it's good to see that you're taking a more active role, and but balancing France Indo-Pacific ambitions with its obligations under the EU's common security and defense policy must be tricky. So what would you say are the key challenges, and how can France align these ambitions with the interests of regional partners?
Yes, well, I think it's it's not so much of an issue for the moment in the sense that, as I mentioned, EU's activities in the Indo-Pacific are still very at an early stage. So
Yes.
it has no real crowding out effect on our capabilities. And so, in fact, we would like to do more. So it doesn't really affect France's or other European countries' ability to be up to the tasks that they are asked to accomplish in other geographies. Now, I think our key priority is how do we make sure we have enough capabilities to support Ukraine and to help other partners in the European continent and its periphery. So I don't think it's really an issue for France at the moment. I think the issue is how do we do more with in the Indo-Pacific with our partners.
So, yeah, it's true, and I feel what you said is absolutely correct. Finally, based on your experience with EU missions and global security, how does France's role in the Indo-Pacific tie into Europeans' broader agenda for multilateralism and global security?
Well, yes, it's a good question. I think you're right. The Europeans are very keen to uphold a multilateral and also a multipolar international stage. So I think again, France and Brussels visions are pretty much aligned. There have been new formats created for the EU to engage with the Indo-Pacific. There is an annual forum now that is held in Brussels. That was also a French initiative that gather all European and Indo-Pacific countries at the ministerial level. There is also a very strong EU ASEAN partnership that has been developing. I think again the objectives are pretty much aligned in the sense of upholding international law, ensuring freedom of navigation, ensuring also that the smaller countries' interests and needs, especially the Pacific Island countries or the smaller island countries, are taken into account. And so, yes, I think these are some of the key elements on which France and the European Union altogether are pushing their relationship with and in the Indo-Pacific.
So that's it, sir. Thank you, Mr. Droin, for sharing your expertise and for helping us better understand the complex dynamics of France's role in the Indo-Pacific. As the world continues to navigate through shifting geopolitical landscapes, these insights are invaluable in shaping future strategies. So thank you once again, sir.
Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.